Hello, welcome back to Al Talks. This is episode number 10. In this episode, I'm going to go over a recent Marc Maron podcast that I listened to, in where he had Eddie Murphy on. I'll put a link in the description to that podcast. You can have a listen to it for yourself. I mentioned how Eddie Murphy is planning to make a comeback for stand up, and he went, it was a very insightful podcast because I like how Marc Maron interviews people for his podcast. He goes within the hour, he really gets a lot out of his guests in terms of background and everything else like that. I thoroughly enjoy listening to his. So in the podcast, he was asking him about his stand-up career and how he got started and everything else, and but he asked him first of all about his return to stand-up, and his return to stand-up, and Eddie Murphy mentioned that he had a whole tour planned before COVID. And he was saying that the material that he had prepared, it wasn't like all jokes. It was kind of a mixed variety of content. But he mentioned as well why Eddie Murphy stopped talking, because Eddie Murphy said he got so famous because he like Raw and Delirious, he did them. I think it was maybe I think it was 22 at the time, or 21 for one of the first ones. He became famous really early. He was a well-known comic from the age of 19, so by the time he got the specials, 2-3 years in, it's an amazing achievement for anybody. But he said he would go up on stage and just stand there and walk around for about 10 minutes. People would laugh, and he was like, I don't because of him being so famous so quickly, it took away from his stand up, and that's why he stopped doing it. That's why he went into films, and then he stopped doing films as well because he said he was getting all these shitty roles and everything. He liked roles where he could be silly and stuff, like Shrek and Donkey. He mentioned that, because Eddie Murphy is a very funny comedian. And any of his movies. Now, I haven't seen Coming to America Part 2 yet. That's something I would really want to sit down and watch. It's a really good movie. It's a really good movie. I haven't seen it, but it's a great cast. Louis Anderson is in it, Arsenio Hall, and Eddie Murphy. So probably sit down and watch that sometime this week. So yeah, after listening to that podcast, very excited to see for the future what the plans will be with Eddie coming back. As I mentioned in previous episodes, I really like Eddie Murphy. I've enjoyed a lot of his movies, and his stand-up is phenomenal. He was a huge pioneer. The later stages of comedy. When he started, you had like Sir Richard Pryor and George Carlin and Hicks and Sam Kinison, and fighting on the front lines, getting arrested for the material on stage and everything else. So be interesting to see what his stand-up brings in the future. So yeah, that's that. I made a little short video. It'll be out by the time this is airing on Tuesday. It's not like it's a live show anyway. I probably will never do not Facebook live streams. I don't think that's something that I do. I'm pretty sure a lot of you don't want to see me sit down for half an hour, and look at me and talk shit, but whatever. Um, so the little short video I did was after I finished listening to the podcast. After I finished listening to the podcast with Marc Maron, um, I was listening to an episode. Um, yeah, okay. No, I thought the video was stopped working anyway. I was listening to Uncle Joey's Joint, and after I finished listening to that episode, it came up in suggested videos, Joey D's stand up. And I decided I'd make a little short video just because it was two clips that I watched. And, it basically sums up how Joey Diaz does comedy. They're only two little clips, they're fairly short, but it's, it's great stuff. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't think I've seen them before because I haven't watched many live clips recorded in comedy clubs. I don't particularly like watching them because you have to be in the room, really, because there's a different energy, and that's one of the reasons why I wouldn't do a Zoom stand up. Not that there's anything wrong with them, but it's just I need that connection, Now obviously Andrew Schultz, one of Joe Rogan's friends, he's figured out the Zoom comedy thing to a T. But I don't think I'll be able to do it. Well, as well, it's not like anyone's asking me to do Zoom shows, but you need that connection. So that's why I don't really like watching, recorded clips of. Sometimes I watch them, but not an awful lot. It's the. Just give me a second. Computer was about to die. But yeah, I don't know. This, nothing wrong with recording sets, but it's just like I said, you need to feel the room. So, speaking of podcasts, there's a couple of podcasts I watch every week. Uncle Joey's Joint on Mondays and Wednesdays. Bloodbath on Tuesday. And then, I listened to a Marc Maron podcast this week because he had Eddie Murphy on, and, I just, I decided I'd listen to it and well, not all this video, but partly of this video because I mentioned Eddie Murphy a couple of weeks back. Actually, another thing before I forget, Eddie Murphy said that the reason Marc Maron asked him why he wanted to do a Dolomite movie, and he said he wanted to do it in the 90s, like in the 1990s. He tried to get a Dolomite movie. He got a script read, wrote, and he tried doing the 90s, and he said it's only 20 years later that Netflix approached him to do it. He approached Netflix, and they backed him to do it. But he said he met Rudy Ray Moore once on the street, and he was like, he was doing comedy, I think, on the street randomly, just screaming and shouting. He's like, "Are you Rudy Ray Moore?" He's like, "Yeah." So it was it was interesting to kind of hear more background of how he got into that movie. I didn't actually know that he was trying to do from the 90s, because Eddie Murphy said he watched Rudy Ray Moore's films when he was small. He mentioned that he loved comedy that was silly because Rudy Ray Moore's movies, they were really, how do I explain it? It's kind of like cinema. I think it's in Zimbabwe and Africa, where they have these movies, but they're so ridiculous. Like it's really they don't have a lot of equipment, so the movies they make they're hilariously edited. Um, but in Africa, it's a huge thriving business. These movies get made, so Eddie Murphy kind of liked that sort of comedy. That's what he enjoyed, and yeah, so it was it was very interesting to hear all the background stuff from that podcast. What other podcasts listen? So I listened to that Mark one because I want to do research for this episode. Like I've kind of during the week I come up with an idea and I roll. That's what I go with for the episode. And when I seen that pop up, decided it'd be a good idea. So I decided to mention it. Any other podcast? I might. Actually, how could I forget? I started listening to Ali Makovsky's podcast. Ali Makovsky is a young comedian. She is one of the up and coming comedians. A couple of weeks ago, I started listening to all the podcasts that Taylor Tomlinson did as well. She's another really good comedian. Ali was on the Joe Rogan podcast a couple of episodes back. That's where I kind of found out about her. I find out about a lot of comedians from Joe Rogan because he's never been wrong. Any comedians that he has on that are friends of his or that he thinks are funny, they, he's not wrong. He's a very good judge of character when it comes to who's a good comedian or not. Let me think. Is there anything else? Just try and think of other podcasts. Tiger Belly, like I mentioned, I haven't watched Tiger Belly in a while now, though. But I think I will. Might start watching to Bobby Lee's brother, Stevie. He has a podcast as well. I haven't watched any of his episodes, but I will try. I think I might watch one or two. He had Ali Makovsky on, and then he had a producer on, and I know actually Ali's producer Anthony. He was on Tiger Belly. I actually seen that today, so I think I might sit down and listen to that. And the podcast is actually the one that's featured on my channel. It's a friend of mine is doing with a couple of his buddies, the Crafty Cruise podcast, where they review different types of beers and ciders, alcoholic beverages basically. It's a pretty good comedy filled podcast. I think that's pretty much it for this episode. In terms of the short videos, like I mentioned in the actual short video, I don't know how often I'll be doing them, or might be once a week, might be once every 2 weeks. I don't know. The one I made, just after seeing the two little bits of stand up from Joey Diaz, I just I really want to make a video. Because it kind of brought me back. When I first found Joey Diaz, Joey Diaz's other podcast that I did with Lee Sayat was The Church of What's Happening Now, and there's 800 something episodes on that. It's really good. The podcast is, he had all the guests. My favorite ones are the ones where he has Ralphie May on. Rest in peace, Ralphie. Because you see a truly deep connection between Joey and Ralphie as a friend, and as nearly as a family member. Like Ralphie was pretty much Joey Diaz's brother. those podcasts are great. It's unfortunate that Ralphie died, but yeah, it was they're truly great podcasts. So that's that for this week's episode. Um, See you back next Tuesday. Figure something out. Maybe a guest, maybe not. I don't know. It's a bumpy roller coaster at this stage. Maybe some pop into my head. We'll see. Episode 11 could be great, could be not. Well, stay tuned and you'll find out. So that's that for this week's episode. Bye.